its trial of the controversial drug hydroxychloroquine. The WHO has cited safety concerns as the drug's usage efficacy is still under review. Hydroxychloroquine is an anti-inflammatory drug used for malaria treatment and autoimmune diseases now for many years. After the breakout, the drug has brought more chaos than clarity, as many resorted to the drug for unproven COVID-19 treatment. The World Health Organization's Director General Tedros has said that evidence suggests that hydroxychloroquine has reportedly shown dangerous side effects such as heart problems and more. The embattled organization has announced that the drug may cause potential dangers in patients and hence is choosing to err on the side of caution by temporarily ceasing trials.
The executive group has implemented a temporary pause of the hydroxychloroquine arm within the Solidarity trial while the safety data is reviewed by the Data Safety Monitoring Board. The other arms of the trial are continuing. This concern relates to the use of hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine in COVID-19.
The move comes after one of the world's most credible medical journals, Lancet, published a new story. Researchers issued a warning after the study that HCQ or hydroxychloroquine should not be used outside clinical trials. It even said hydroxychloroquine raises the risk of death in COVID-19 patients. The study involved 96,000 coronavirus patients and nearly 15,000 were given hydroxychloroquine or HCQ or a related form of chloroquine. The research concluded that those who got that treatment were more likely to die. They were also at risk of developing heart rhythm complications as well. The drug has been backed by US President Donald Trump, however, to combat the deadly coronavirus. Donald Trump even revealed last week that he was consuming the drug himself as a preventive measure despite several warnings by medical experts. He has, however, clarified that Trump is no longer consuming the drug.
You're finishing your 2-week course of hydroxychloroquine, correct?
Just finished, yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, I'm still here.
Yes,
to the best of my knowledge, here I am.
Hydroxychloroquine, is it a miracle drug or a death pill? The question is back and the debate is very serious. The World Health Organization has suspended hydroxychloroquine trials, but India will continue to use this quote-unquote wonder drug. The Indian Council of Medical Research has claimed that HCQ possesses antiviral properties and its benefits outweigh the side effects. Meanwhile, it has also cautioned that the antiviral drug must not be consumed on an empty stomach.
We had thought that it may be a useful drug for prophylaxis, for prevention of COVID, and taking the biological plausibility one, taking the in vitro data, and taking the availability and the safety of this drug, we had recommended it for as empiric use under strict medical supervision about a month and a half back. And then we also said that some studies should be started and to look at where is hydroxychloroquine performing. During these 6 weeks or 5.5 or 4.5, 5, 6 weeks, we got some data in India, and they were mainly observational studies. Some of them were case-controlled studies, which and some of us were observational studies in different cohorts, which were done at AIMS, was done at ICMR, the case-control study, and also in 3 public hospitals within Delhi. And now it was very difficult to do a randomized trial of something which we say may benefit. So randomized trial was not possible. So we looked at the data from these observational studies as well as from the case control studies. And what we found that it may be working. So therefore, and we also found that there were no major side effects except nausea, and that was from the Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission results of all the people that were being monitored for hydroxychloroquine. And therefore we found that much of them were complaining of nausea or vomiting and some palpitations occasionally.
Despite the reservations from the scientific community, India will use this drug, both for treatment and as a post-exposure preventive measure. In fact, India is one of the largest makers of this drug. It is being exported to 55 other countries from India. But India is not alone in this. A French doctor has also dismissed the World Health Organization's verdict on hydroxychloroquine. Dr. Didier Raoult has hailed HCQ as a miracle treatment for the coronavirus. We are now joined by one of the world's renowned virologists, Professor Amos Pane from Jerusalem. Now, Professor Amos is a virologist at the Hebrew University Faculty of Medicine. Professor, thank you so much for giving us your time. Welcome to Beyond. The big question, the only question right now in the world, does the HCQ or hydroxychloroquine work in either treating the coronavirus patients or preventing infection in the first place?
Okay. We know chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine for many, many years. And it has been used successfully for malaria. And we have tried it. I tried it myself in my own laboratory many years ago against viruses, different viruses, like influenza virus and other viruses. And it works, but only in vitro, in the laboratory setting, and only during the early phases of the infection. If you use it later in the infection cycle of the virus, it doesn't help, because what chloroquine is doing, it blocks the entry of the virus to the cells.
Right.
After the virus enters the cells, it's like shutting the door after the thief is already in the room.
Right.
So it doesn't help. And therefore, if the intention is to use it prophylactically, before exposure or just after exposure, then it may work. However, if you use it 4 or 5 days after the infection, when disease signs start setting on, when people have difficulty in breathing, in different high fever, then there is no reason why it would work. So people should be very careful when they say it works or it doesn't work. It depends when you give the drug.
Right. That's a very important point, Dr. Amos, that you're making, Professor Amos, that it has to be used in the initial stages, in the initial stage before the virus actually enters the cell, because after that it really won't work. So it's important to note here, when do these countries actually give this drug to the coronavirus suspects or the patients? Do you side with the World Health Organization that has suddenly come up and said that it is likely to increase the death rate among people who take this drug? Is that a correct statement by the World Health Organization?
Well, they have done an experiment which is not placebo-controlled experiment. In a way, they've done experiment where they took different data from different hospitals and calculated to show that, in fact, there is increased mortality. However, before we get a well-controlled experiment, and we know exactly when the drug is given relative to the infection, we cannot draw conclusions. So right now, what the WHO is saying is that be careful, don't rush to use it before you know exactly when you are going to use it and to the populations that you are going to give it. Because if you give it to elderly people with heart problems, then it's dangerous to the heart.
Right.
So many factors should be given before this drug is given, especially to people with some underlying diseases, heart diseases, lung diseases. So every hospital should make a very well-controlled study.
Absolutely.
and learn when to give it.
Absolutely. So very key points being made by Professor Amos here that all countries and hospitals must be responsible themselves to first monitor the stage at which they are giving this drug to possible patients, and then whether the patients are suffering from any other comorbid diseases. So that's the crucial point here, Professor Amos, if I get it correct. But in your own study, in your own observations, have you noticed whether this drug has actually worked in preventing this disease or improving the condition of patients?
I cannot tell you large numbers, but I can tell you that if it's given very early, either prophylactically, to people who have been in contact with many diseased patients, like in a hospital setting, or immediately after the drug is given, after the infection occurs, then the likelihood is that the drug will affect the disease, will ameliorate the disease. But consider very carefully the population that you give it to. Don't rush and give it to old people with heart disease. That's dangerous for them.
Professor, I think the responsibility lies with various countries and hospitals to monitor strictly to who they are giving this drug to and at what stage of that infection. Now, the million-dollar question really is, Professor, I have to ask you this, since you are a leading virologist. Was the coronavirus made in a laboratory, or does it have natural origins? Do we have an answer yet?
Yeah, in my mind, it's a natural disease which jumped to us from animals. I don't see any way that a laboratory will engineer this virus by genetic engineering means. It's very similar to other coronaviruses that we know are in nature, in bats and in other animals. So just now there is no reason to suspect that it was engineered, maliciously in a laboratory. I don't believe it.
Right. Final question, Professor, before I let you go. When can the world expect a vaccine?
Well, there's such an effort now to develop a vaccine, and there are now already clinical studies with some positive outcomes. Some early studies have shown that in humans, you can get neutralizing antibodies, meaning that you can get in the blood of people who got the vaccine antibodies that can kill the virus. So this gives us a lot of hope. And I believe that based on these initial results, probably.
Right, we'll try and reconnect with Professor Amos there, who was joining us live from Jerusalem, one of the world's leading virologists. And Professor, you were just concluding your statement. When can the world expect a vaccine?
Yeah, I believe that in 6 to 12 months, we can expect a prototype of vaccine ready for use. Now, the question is how fast countries will be able to produce it.
Right.
India will have to produce 1.5 million doses.
Absolutely.
United States will have to produce 300 million. So the question is the capacity, the production capacity of each country.
Right.
And this will take time.
Absolutely.
So this will be the bottleneck.
One final question, Professor, because we have been talking about vaccines, we are learning that Israel is also in the process of, or in the hunt of a vaccine. Could you give us an update on Israel's efforts against the pandemic?
Yeah, Israel has started to work on this issue very early. And just 2 weeks ago, a group of scientists from the Biological Institute, which is a government institute, have announced that they have made monoclonal antibodies that neutralize, that kill the virus. And this is the first step in developing a vaccine. Just now, they are working on it, but to the best of my knowledge, they have not reached human trials.
Right.
So this is a crucial step, human trials.
Right. Professor Amos, thank you so much for joining us on Beyond. The professor's word to all our viewers and anyone watching is clear that it's the responsibility of the countries and the hospitals to monitor at what stage are they giving this miracle drug, hydroxychloroquine, to patients for it to be effective at all.